morning, everybody. Welcome to my 1998 Jeep Grand Cherokee 5.9 Limited. A little background how this car came to me. So my first car was a 1993 Grand Wagoneer on the same chassis that this was built on. We got that, I think, when I was in middle school, when my parents were involved in a car accident. So I inherited that when, that was my first car when I was 17. Then in the spring, I think, of my sophomore year at college, my sister got her license, or her permit, I think, and it was, and she needed a car at that point. So my parents and I started hunting for a new car for me, because she was set to inherit my 93 Wagoneer. At a budget of, I think it was $5K, and between where I was in Ohio and Connecticut, the winters can get pretty bad. So we definitely wanted to pick up a 4x4. And me being, a 19, 20-year-old college kid whose, main diet was, ramen, Red Bull, and testosterone, I wanted something cool and manly. I wasn't going to settle for like a frickin' Explorer Sport Track or some, nonsense like that. So I found this thing, and I was like, I've never heard of the 5.9. Did a little research, found out what it was, how special this thing is. So I sent that over and said, hey, let's take a look at this. I was in Ohio at the time. My dad was here in Connecticut. The car was in Massachusetts. So he and my mom drove up, saw the car, drove the car, got it, and then came back, drove it out to Ohio, swapped with me. They took the 93 back, and then my sister got it. And I've had this thing ever since, so that's probably 6 years now I've had this. And it's been a lot of fun. It's let me down a few times. It's allowed me to have a lot of fun sometimes. So for those of you who may not be, Jeep diehards, 93 to 98 was the ZJ chassis, which is this body style. They all had the same body style, the same chassis. 98 was the last year of the ZJ. So Chrysler was like, you know what, let's do something special. Let's take the 5.9 liter out of the Durango at the time, I think it was, put it in the Grand Cherokee, give it even more horsepower, a few other fun toys like, some 16-inch wheels, different, I think it had different axles and different transmission maybe. Call it the 5.9 Limited, do a special edition, and that'll be our last hurrah for the ZJ. Stuff that's awesome, obviously, the engine. From the factory, this was, I think, 245 horse, 345 torque. For a 4,200 pound truck, this thing gets up and goes. It really does. Let's see here. So I'll try and find a nice little straightaway where I can maybe slow down a little bit into a small pull. Here we're at 45, overdrive off. 70. They only made, this is going to sound like a lot, so they made about a little over 14,000 5.9 Limiteds in 1998, which is a lot, but compared to the total number of ZJs there are out on the road, which is like, I think like 2 to 4 million or something like that, 14,000 of this example is relatively uncommon. I've seen in the last 6 years maybe 3 others on the road, and very few come up for sale. The ones I do see for sale are like lifted and modded and all kinds of nonsense. So, which, may not be, if you're into that, then great. I wasn't. I was in college. I needed something that didn't have a 6-inch lift on it, didn't have a ridiculous cam, something that I could actually use and was going to be reliable all day, every day. That being said, if you can find one of these, that's, you know, maybe under 200,000 miles, that's relatively stock, get it. Not necessarily because, you know, I think it would be a good investment, or, you know, it's going to be like, oh, they're going to go way up in value, but just because it's a cool car, I think. You know, in 1998, this was the fastest SUV in the world. I think it did 0 to 60 in something like 6.5 seconds back then. I don't know what it's doing now. This thing was and still is pretty damn fast. If you liken it to modern terms, this is kind of the original SRT8 Jeep. That being said, you can still use this off-road because it's got good ground clearance. It's got a tire sidewall. You know, it's fast, but it's still a Jeep. You know, an SRT8 is, yeah, it's stupid fast and it handles really well and it's really powerful, but you can't take it off-road. And let's be honest, kids, is an SRT8 Jeep with tires that are about that thick, really, and, you know, 500 horsepower, is that really the car you want to be driving through a redonkulous blizzard? As an all-around Jeep that is, you know, that's gonna light your hair on fire on the dirt and on the pavement, this is the one. This thing is awesome. That being said, as loud as it is and manly and fast as it is, it does of course have a few downsides. Being a 360 cubic inch V8 from the 90s, the gas mileage is awful. And to make matters worse, it only takes 93. The manual says you can put 91 in it, but on mine at least, 91 you get detonation. 91's not having it. So it's got to be 93, which, depending on where you live, can cost, is anywhere from 20 to 50 cents a gallon more than 83. So this thing is expensive to run. Gas mileage, I do nowadays mostly city. What are we at right now? What's my average? 13.4. 13.4 at 93 octane. Because this was my daily for 6 years, I was burning, $80 to $95 a week, depending on how expensive gas was. $80 to $95 a week in gas this thing was sucking down as my daily driver. And let me tell you, that got old real fast. Some other things that are less than perfect with this car, I don't know if it's an inherent problem with the car, or if I just need to replace the ancient steering rack bushings and stuff like that, is that the steering is pretty, it's pretty limp. The car is not moving. The steering needs so much input for it actually to change direction, that it kind of spoils the cornering of it. And again, it's an old American SUV that was never meant for cornering. So while I can't complain that much, I'm going to complain a little. At the same time, and this is something that I don't think has anything to do with might not have anything to do with worn out parts, is that the steering is very numb. You really don't feel what's going on the wheels, be it at the limits of grip or, when you're snow drifting or whatever. It doesn't, the wheel, so what happens in the wheels isn't really communicated to the steering wheel. For example, if it's in my Civic, if I spin the wheels, I know it because I feel it. Here, if the front wheels could be spinning, and I'd have no idea. Not a clue. Since I've gotten the car, I've replaced all 4 shock absorbers. So it actually, the ride is actually pretty good. The body roll is not obscene. When you're going through the corners, the main thing that bugs me, and that makes the car feel kind of not great in the corners is the seats. There's pretty much no torso and thigh bolstering to speak of. So when you do take a corner, there's nothing really holding you in place, holding my body in place, which kind of gives it the illusion that the car's. It kind of gives me the illusion that the car's not happy in the corners, that it's floppy, that it's soft, and it really isn't. I think with a more aggressive seat, I think it would feel better in the corners, purely because I wouldn't be flopping around so much. Now, tractor, brakes. That's another thing. The brake pedal's a little mushy. Alright, so seriously, bro. You're not gonna overtake this guy. Alright, there's straight road, wide open road, stuck behind a tractor, doing 20 in a 40 zone, and frickin' Equinox is like, oh, I'm just gonna sit here. Ugh. So what was I saying? The brakes. Really don't think there's any air in the lines. So that being said, the pedal is, you really got to push it. I find myself oftentimes using 2 feet to brake instead of 1. Gas and brake is supposed to be with 1 foot, right? So you press the brake with your. I've been pressing the brake with my right foot for the last 8 years, and it seems as though no matter what car I'm in, if I use my left foot to brake, maybe it's because my brain doesn't know how to control my left leg on a brake pedal, but I always press way too hard, and it's almost feel like I slam on the brakes, even though it doesn't feel like I'm slamming on the brakes. So in this car, I kind of do that a little bit. So like where my right leg seems like it's pushing, it's like stop with my right leg, and then I just feed in my left foot a little bit, and it slows right down. Maybe I'm just a wuss. I don't know. Other points against this car, because it's a big 90s metal square, rectangle rather, highway noise is atrocious. There's no sugarcoating it. This thing, between the exhaust and how square everything is, it's really loud at highway speeds. If you're a classical music lover, and you go on and you commute an hour both ways to work, or you go on a lot of road trips, this is not the car for you. Because you're going to get down the highway, you're going to think, oh, I'm going to put my Brandenburg Concerto on by Bach. And you're not going to hear shit. You need to have like Def Leppard going in this thing in order to enjoy the radio at all. So as far as stuff I don't really like about this car, that honestly is about it. Let's talk about the personality of this car a little bit. It's kind of a lazy car. Notice that when I'm driving this thing, I don't know if maybe it's because because it doesn't handle it well at all, or because doing 70 miles an hour in this feels like it's going to fall apart, and doing 70 in my Civic feels like I'm in church. I generally drive this thing a lot slower and a lot more lackadaisical than I do in my Civic. Because it's a big, soft, comfy SUV. It really is. And at the same time, the engine it's kind of slow to rev and slow to respond. There are friends that you hang out with, and after a long day at work, and you meet up with them. It's like, and you got the friend who's like, yeah, man, that was a crappy day at work. Let's go to Fight Club. Then there are your cars that you get into after work. And it's like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, honey. let me cook you a hot meal. Here's a beer. Go sit on the couch and watch House of Cards or Top Gear. That's what this car is. You know, you get into it after a day's work. It's just like comfy cruiser. Getting my Civic after a long day's work, and the Civic is the car that wants to go to Fight Club and tear some ass. So let's talk really quick about winter and off-road. More so winter in this car. So the four-wheel drive system in this thing, it's not really four-wheel all of the time. It's got a center, it's got a viscous coupler. So the viscous coupler is filled with fluid. And most of the time, you know, like 90% of the time, this thing is rear-wheel drive only. But if the rear wheels are spinning faster than the front wheels, and they're connected through this viscous coupler, so if the rear wheels are spinning faster, it's going to heat up the coupler and then lock it, you know, and then heat up the fluid and then wind up locking and engaging the front drive shaft, and then it will send power to the front wheels. I think it's a reasonably clever system, but depending on the situation you're in, I'd much rather have like a two-wheel drive, 4-high, 4-low neutral in my little drive handle switch. So in the winter, this thing is pretty great. You do get a bit of a slide on. It's perfectly controllable. You know, it's really easy to handle in the winter because it's not, you know, the steering isn't like a laser edge, and you've got so much power. You can slide it really easily, and you know get the tail out and do some nice donuts in the snow. It's really easy to handle. And the tires, the Coopers, and then also the Toyos, while not winter tires, did work pretty well. They worked well enough that I didn't ever feel a need to spend another $400 or $500 on snow tires.